Okay, welcome to our Erev Shabbat class. Parashat Beresheet, Sefer Beresheet. Torah starts again. B'simanat Tava b'Ezrat Hashem. The question today is the objective of the existence of mankind. What is it? How about that for a vague, challenging question to start off the learning of Torah? But the truth is that with the depth and the impossibility of understanding Maaseh Bereshit, and in fact, with the prohibition, if one does understand creation and its mysteries and its depth and the way the Torah presents it, even if one does have the incredible insight and depth of comprehension, he is prohibited from halakha, codified by the Rambam, to speak and teach this in public. What we can do, certainly, is analyze text, and we can extrapolate messages, implications. We can glean lessons. Obviously, we must study Torah and take whatever we can from the Maaseh Bereshit storyline, from the text, from the episode, for our Jewish lives, Torah messages, guidance, thoughts, philosophy, depth of concepts, all of that. And so, first and foremost, as people who walk the face of the earth, we would want to know what the Torah has to tell us, about the human race, about the Homo sapien. What does Hashem expect of him? And to search for that, we would really start from the beginning. When Hashem created man, what terminology is used for man and what terminology is used within the creation of man. So we're going to try, based on three different angles of three different commentators, to answer that very challenging and deep question just based on this phraseology. So let's look. There are two primary pisukim when you talk about creation of man. We know that Perek Bet, chapter 2 of Parashat Beresheet, to a great extent, it almost looks redundant, elaborates, broadens, and fleshes out, you can say, what was already spoken or stated in chapter 1, Perek Aleph. And that is true as well for the creation of man. And I'll tell you what I'm talking about. In Perek Aleph, on the sixth day of creation, in Pasuk, the famous Pasuk, you could say Pesukim, Kaf Vav, and Kaf Zayin, speaks of Hashem, his plan to and his act of creating man. Of course, there are many questions in these Pesukim, the language, the terminologies, the grammar, and we're not going to analyze, this is not a comprehensive class on Chumash and those Pesukim. Let's just read them. Pasuk Vav, Vayom Elohim na'aseh Adam b'salmenu kidmutenu. Let us make man in our form and our image. Just those words itself, saying form and image regarding God are problematic, etc. And we jump to Kavzayim Vayivra Elohim et Adam. That was the plan. This is the actual carrying out of the plan. And Hashem created man, this salmo, in his, you want to say, form or image. No English words capture these Hebrew words at all. So it's just a cute little exercise to try to translate. B'Selem Elohim bara'ato. How did he create man? And here are the two key words. Selem Elohim. That's how we're described by God. So that's one source. And the other one, the matching source. In other words, the pasuk that aligns to creation of man in Perek Bet is Perek Bet pasuk Zayin. Right? That's the other one pasuk which describes God's act of creation of man. But Yisher Adonai Elohim et Adam, which is it's a synonym for Vayivra. You can ask why it says Vayisher, is a double yod, all types of lessons to be learned from that. But he created man, Afar min ha'adam. He created him dirt from the earth and blew in his nostrils a spirit of life, and man became a nefesh hayah, which is incidentally nefesh hayah, the same term that's used for all of the animal kind and all other creations. Okay, these are the two sources. So we're going to use, and really we can narrow down man to his description and his name. His description is a Selem Elohim, as Hashem planned out. Let's make man B'Salmenu Kidmutenu, in our image and our form. And he created him indeed. He carried out his plan as a Selem Elohim. That's one term. And then there's man's name. What's man's name? Adam. Okay. Really just those two terms alone, which the Torah Kadoshah is using to describe man, is enough to be able to open up a world of descriptions and concepts in terms of man's existence, his objective, of his the creation of man, the expectancies of man by Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. One is the Ramban. So the Ramban focuses on, as do many commentators, on this we terminology, right? That bothers us so much. Is one God. It's heretical to think that there's only any more than one creator, that there's another creator. And so, of course, a lot of discussion about what does this mean? Na'aseh. Grammatically, that means let us make man, right? Besalmenu, kidmutenu. And again, those words, form, image, just English words that we're using. But the problem that we have is our form, where's the team of God? Where, what buddies is he talking? What assistants is he referring to? Right? Of course, that's the famous question. It's the obvious question. So the Ramban says, all right, very simple. If you look to the aligned pasuk in Perek Bet, chapter 2, verse 7, you see indeed that man, God created man as a combination. And that combination is stated to be afar min ha'adama, dirt from the earth, and nishmat hayim, and blowing in him, in his nostrils, a spirit of life. Of course, Rashi there in Pasuk Bet, in Perek Bet, Pasuk Zayin rather, points out that this is based on the Midrashim of Hachamim, this statement. We actually mentioned this a few years ago in this class, that man is created uniquely from Elyonim and Tachtonim. In other words, from material matter, Tachtonim, earthly matter, physical makeup, that's Tachtonim, lower, so to speak, elements, and Elyonim, and godly matter, so to speak, or metaphysical nature, we call spirit. In other words, uniquely, Hashem describes his ingredients in man as afar min ha'adama. You can touch us, you can feel us. We have a physical jacket, right? It gets worn out, it gets tired, it gets sick, it gets old, it leaves eventually, disintegrates and decays. And then there is Al-Yonim, not just afar min ha'adama. That's his temporary clothing, it's his jacket, his physicality. But Nishmat Hayim, there's an eternal nature to man. There's a godly spirit in man. That's man's actual, you can say, significant existence. And therefore, he has two ingredients. And therefore, says that Ramban, kick it back to Perek Aleph, when there was this plan of God that he set out, which is let us make man in our image, in our form. There are many different interpretations. Again, this is the Ramban's take, and that is us is me and my other contributing partner. Who is that? Earth. Afar bin ha'adama. That's one of the ingredients. Hey, Earth. Hey, physical matter. What do you say? Let's make a part. Okay, let us make man. In other words, you'll be one ingredient, as we'll see in the next perek, next chapter. Afar min ha'adama, dirt of the earth, and I'll be the other ingredient. Vayipach be'apav nishmat hayim, and I'll blow a spirit of life into him. So says the Ramban, this us, obviously, no one understands this, Chas v'shalom, to mean another entity, the deity, God forbid, creating man. Rather, it's another component of man. That's the us. And it refers to this unbelievable, makeup, component base of the human being that is so different from every other creation that exists in the universe. And that is that he looks physical, but he's really only partly physical. And you could even say he's essentially not physical. That physicality is something temporary. And therefore, says the Ramban, the next pasuk goes on to describe man as a Selem Elohim. Yes, he's a form, right? But yes, he's physical, but that's really in the image of God. He's godly. And he calls it a Pele because of the wondrous makeup of what man really is. That terminology is used as Selem Elohim. And so that, and this is the ground level here. This is ground zero, right? And the simplest description of man, it's not so simple, right? Man is completely distinct. There's very little comparison between man and anything else, only that you can feel and touch him. Otherwise, the essence of man is something that is contributed by God. Now, the end of the pasuk in Perek Bet, pasuk Zayin, says, Vahiya Adam lenefesh haya, which sounds like a little bit of a letdown, because, again, that's the terminology that's used really for all creations. Check out the fifth day of creation. Behemot and Hayot are also called Nefesh Haya, right? So why is that different? The point is, Rabbi Hirsch explains this, that Vayipapa Apav Nishmat Hayim, he blew in him a spirit of life, Vahiha Adam Nefesh Haya. That is his being. That is his Nefesh Haya. In other words, the true existence of man is the Nishmat Hayim. Is not his physical, afar, earthly matter makeup, not his physical, tangible component. That's not his essential being, because that is fleeting and temporary. His essential existence is the Nefesh Haya existence, which is contributed by his essential Nefesh Haya. His existence as a creation is the Nishmat Hayim, is the contribution of God, is the spiritual life that is blown into him. So that is one lesson, maybe not so much stating yet an objective of man's existence, but certainly a lesson in terms of how to describe the creation of man. Okay, so I said 3 points, right? We have the Ramban. I want to go on to the Sforno's explanation. To me, a profound analysis of this term, Selem Elohim. He says, look at the word, and by the way, does that mean God? Does it mean there, Selem Elohim, or not? Says the Sforno, no, it does not mean God. Where else, how else do we see the word Elohim used? We see angels called Elohim, and in fact, we see man called Elohim in Parashat Mishpatim, right? Where a person approaches the judge in the court, right? And it says Elohim, he brings it to the Elohim. A judge, says the Sforno, anything that represents a higher end of intellect, something that represents a eternal and unlimited type of existence, that's called Elohim. So obviously God, an angel, but also an intellectual giant, like a judge, is called Elohim. That represents the sechel, the mind, the intellect, which is inextricably connected to the neshama. Really, our intellect, which is non-physical, intangible. Where's my intellect? Where's my knowledge? Can you point it out? No, if you did brain surgery and open your brain, you still can't point it out, right? It is really your neshama. It's really connected to your soul. And it is something that works conversely. It's a converse relationship to your body. With your body, the older you get, the more worn out, the more tired, right? That's life. But the intellect, we stay healthy, B'ezrat Hashem, quite the opposite. The stronger, the more refined, the more savvy, the more experienced, the more valuable it becomes. And indeed, that part of us is the eternal part of our being, because that remains with the neshama. And therefore, says the Sforno, Here, when we talk about a Elohim, we speak about that not just component of man, but that potential ability of man to be Elohim. To be Elohim can mean to be like God-like, but in what way? To exercise his unique distinction from all other beings, i.e., his intellect, and exercise it in a very virtuous and holy manner, to cultivate his intellect, to grow in chokhmah, in knowledge, and specifically knowledge in Torah, and to foster a relationship of yirah and ahava, fear and love of God, and have a lifetime of building and growing and perpetuating that type of existence in this world. And eventually, he becomes an Elohim. But guess what? That's not how man is described by God when he's created. He's described as a Tselem Elohim. Because when you're created, we are created, we are only an image of that. In other words, we're only a form of that. It's just a mold. We haven't become Elohim. If we choose to spend our lives as physical beings, so we're like behemoth. We eat, we drink, we procreate, we make a living, we survive. Essentially, what we're doing most of our day is surviving. And at the end of 120, we go back to Earth. Guess what? We just remained as a Tselem, only a form of what could have been Elohim. We've never been tragically to our potential. And it's, it's possible for man to come pretty close to this, although everyone accomplishes something on Earth, right? But not to have grown too much from his initial existence. You were born a Tselem, only a potential of becoming an Elohim, and you died. Didn't tap in too much to that potential, as opposed to someone who builds and grows and cultivates that Elohim potential. And this is what we're meant to do. That's our distinct existence from all other creations. We build that intellect, grow in chokhmah. We foster that relationship of yirah and hava with Hashem. Then we go from just being a potential, a Tselem, a form of Elohim, to an Elohim. That, says this Sforno, is why Tselem Elohim is a description of man, because man has an expectancy from HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the moment that he's created. He has this incredible, unlimited potential when he's placed here, and God sits back and enjoys the show. What is he going to do with this potential? Will he remain just a Tselem of Elohim or become an Elohim? Profound by the Sforno. One more, that's two. Third analysis, and that is man's name. What's his name? In English, we call him Adam. Adam. Says the Sforno, well, if you ever want to understand the word, you derive, you research, and you analyze the etymology of that word. The shortest, the root. From where does it emanate? And a lot of times there's a root word which really emanates from, it's not an original form, and it emanates from another root word. And we search Torah, we search Tanakh to find other usages, and we compare and contrast. And usually the most original form is the root from which all other usages, appearances play out and emanate from. So he says, let's look at Adam. What is the root of Adam? He says the biggest mistake people make is to think that Adam comes from Adama, because that would be completely inaccurate, right? He's Afar ben Adama. So instead he says it's quite the contrary. Adama comes from Adam. Adama is used in earthly existence, emanates, the etymology of that is Adam, because Adam is part Adama, right? But the word Adam does not flow from Adama. It's quite the contrary, he says. So where does Adam come from? Now, in the Hebrew language, there are letters sometimes that are interchangeable. Sometimes because they're groniyot, they're the throat letters, as we call them, Aleph and Het and Ayin. And sometimes they're interchangeable because we see in Tanakh they're actually used in an interchangeable way. Taf, Dalit, sometimes Samech Shin, etc. So he says, I'm going to show you 3 different possible roots that are the etymology of the word Adam. Each one of them shows us what the expectations and the description of man's objective in this world really is. The first one he says is a color, Edom, red. And he says amazingly that red is the least broken ray of the spectrum of a ray of pure light, is red. Okay, Google it. It's a true fact. And he says because of that, that means and that man is the closest thing that God has here to perfection, which means he's the nearest creation in terms of the revelation of the divine on earth. He's the closest you'll ever get to see. Where's God? I can't see him. Look at man. That's the closest you'll get to seeing God on earth. The closest thing to the absolute truth is man, because he's Adam, he's Edom, he's red. He's that least broken ray of light on the spectrum of pure light. That's one possible route. Another one, and we're taking Aleph to head, the Geroniyot, Hadam or Hadom. And in Yeshaya, it says that Ha'aretz Hadom Rachlai. God says that the land is the footstool for my legs in that metaphor. And what does that mean? It means basically that man, his job is the messenger. He's the transmitter of God and the glory of God on this earth. In other words, if I have man here, I don't have to come all the way down to earth. It's just my footstool. I just go down so far, and my footstool, right, I rest my legs on him. He takes it down to the ground. In other words, man's my messenger over here. Man carries out my word, my objective, right? Because he is my elevated, my distinct, my pristine creation. And therefore, he is my footstool, so to speak, on earth. And lastly, he says, and this is a harder one because that takes 2 letters and interchanges them from Adam to Hatam, interchanging a head with an Aleph and a Dalet with a Tav, but both which are acceptable in the letter and word uses throughout Tanakh. And what's Hatam? Hatam is a seal. And we see in the 6th day of creation, it says, God, so to speak, turns around and says, after he makes man, now in retrospect, I see everything that I made, because everything is now worth it, because man is the seal. Without man, he brings home to the world its unseen creator, which is God. And without man, nothing is worth it in this world. He's the seal of the world, he said. He has another one, actually. It's Dalet Mem. He takes out the Aleph, and he says that Dam Domeh, right? The word Domeh is similar, is from Dalet to Mem. Is just the prefix to it. I am similar, it means. Adam. I'm Domeh. I'm Domeh to God. I'm the image of God, and I act as a godly being in this earth. So we see from Adam, his actual name, that man has an essential objective here. And that is to carry out godliness on earth, to bring awareness of God on earth, to act halakta b'drachav as a godly being in his character, in his lifestyle, in his activity. And of course, as history played out, and a nation was chosen to do that through the practice and study of Torah HaKedoshah. And that's the way Adam lives up to his name, as stated right off the bat in creation, and becomes a godly messenger and emissary of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the creator on the earth and the world which he created. So through our analysis, and this is just the surface, and a couple of points of the description of man, Selem Elohim, and the name of man, Adam, we are able to glean from Parashat Beresheet just a few of the objectives and the purposes of the existence of mankind here in this world.